I try to help people understand who is punching them, why are they punching them, and how they can punch back. Of course, not through violence, of course. I've got to say that, otherwise I'll get another incitement charge. We beat that, by the way. We actually beat that. The police, it was all scare tactics. So it sounds like I'm talking to an audience that actually knows me. That's good. That's all right. We have a very esteemed guest here today who I'm going to invite up in a second. But before I get to that, I've been invited to come here and speak on the topic of alarmism, especially when it comes to our youth on the topic of climate change. 12 years until the world ends. Ooh, I'm scared. I think that there's a lot of experts on the topics that can actually shed some really good light on the climate change topic. One of them is actually here today. He's not an expert, but he's very well read on it, and he runs Nation First. He's a former member of Parliament. His name is George Christensen. He was the member for Dawson. George, could you please come to the stage? So we had a similar climate event in Sydney, and George almost made it, but his flight was delayed. And I was just thinking, George is at this one. I definitely want to get him on stage. So George, welcome.
Thanks very much, Joel.
So we've got a very interesting topic today: the abuse of youth, the rise of this religion that's coming out. You know, Nietzsche said, he declared the death of God, and it was sort of inevitable that we were going to see the rise of something to take its place, because people still have that fear of death. They still have that fear of, the afterlife. What do you think is undergirding this phenomenon? Why is this a fertile time for the rise of this sort of new climate religion?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, and there's many people that have actually said that the whole climate change agenda is pretty much akin to a religion. It's actually a religion of the past too, paganism, where we sacrifice things to the climate gods so that it would rain one day or shine the next. And what is being done is just as fruitless right now. But it is because, as you've said, our culture has changed drastically, and there is a vacuum. The vacuum is because the Christian church, largely in the West, has just abdicated the stage. They've just walked off. We're scared, as Reverend James McPherson said earlier, we're scared as a people and as a church to state our Christian convictions, because there's these gatekeepers, the wokeisters, the politically correct brigade that'll jump down our throat and try and cancel us, try and do harm to us, try and stop us from getting jobs, like the head of Essendon, the former head of Essendon. And so we're frightened, but we've abdicated the stage. And nature abhors a vacuum. And so you put another religion in front of people, another goal that people can pursue, where there's indulgences. We've got to self-flagellate because we've done something wrong. Oh, forgive us, Gaia, for our sins against the planet. And it sucks in people. Yeah. And it's indoctrinating. This agenda has indoctrinated so many youth through the media, through the mass media, through politics, through schools, definitely, and universities. You'd be shocked at what some kids are learning. I got to say, credit to Mark Latham, he unpicks a lot of this stuff in New South Wales Parliament. But this is happening, and the only way I can see it being undone, Joel, and I'm probably skipping a question that you've got,
please go.
is by us retaking control, particularly of the next generation. There has to be a level of unlearning and unschooling this rubbish that has been shoved down the throats of our kids, so that the next generation isn't going to be just brainwashed zombies in this cult that we call climate change.
Absolutely. Amen. Amen to that. Jordan Peterson was here late last year. I think it was in October or November. And he had an excellent rule that he had in his new book, 12 More Rules for Life. It was where responsibility has been abdicated, opportunity lurks. I sort of did a spin-off of that, and I said, if you don't seize that opportunity, the worst kinds of people will seize that opportunity, and they will do that. In America, it's so cool how they stream their board meetings for their schools. And you can actually see parents getting up and saying, oh, you know, why are you teaching me this? This is the textbook. Why is this a prescribed textbook? And it's amazing to see that, because you see that grassroots revolution going on where people are actively getting elected to those boards and reforming their schools. So when it comes to what's going on with the fear factor, we've seen this happen in the last couple of years. We've got an excellent case study in the pandemic. Where were our churches? Where were our leaders? Why did they abdicate their responsibility and leave very unlikely people like myself? I'm a construction guy. I used to lay bricks. I used to tie steel. I shouldn't be here. But what happened there with the leadership?
Well, if we're specifically talking about the pandemic, I mean, I've got some thoughts. I mean, right at the start, you could forgive just about anyone for thinking that this is, you know, the Black Plague being brought back, because the fear was hyped up. Even I thought that this is going to be some serious stuff that's going to arrive here and we're going to see a lot of deaths. But a couple of months into it, that didn't eventuate. And so I think it was at that stage that people should have started questioning. But the problem was that all those institutional gatekeepers I talked about before with climate change, particularly the media, were screaming at people to still be afraid, cower in your homes. And more than that, it was like a war effort, right? You heard that language being deployed, that this was a battle, this was a fight, this was a war against a virus, we were all in this together. And so if you decided to go against the war effort, you were a traitor. And you wonder why there was such visceral reaction of neighbour against neighbour, family member against family member on this issue, because they were programmed by all the institutional gatekeepers, particularly the media, who went out of their way. They say it is actually, and I forget the exact name of it, but like an Australian Institute for Media Studies, they did a massive survey of all the media that happened during the start of the pandemic, and they went and spoke to journalists, and they openly admit our role was to amplify the official messages of government. Not to question it, not to interrogate it, but to amplify it and to shut down dissenting voices. So that's what happened. So I, to a degree, would forgive some people on this, including Christian pastors, but I think that there was a point at which that the bleeding obvious was in front of you. And I think when you went along with it further, it was just because you were in too deep. You dug the hole too deep for yourself. You didn't want to admit that you were wrong. And I think that whether it was church pastors, whether it was politicians, whether it was just people who had, masked up and were lining up for the vaccine, I don't think that we can separate it and say, oh, the church leaders in particular were at fault, but they were part of the problem.
Yeah, we've definitely seen the best and worst of humanity examples of it in the last 3 years. I mean, I've seen during the lockdowns in southwestern Sydney, there were some lovely mothers out of their own pocket and donations from the public. They were going out and feeding a lot of people that were out there that didn't have food. And there were a lot of other not-for-profits that weren't actually there to help. And they were looking for leadership at the time. But more on a personal level, and bringing it back to, this is a Christian conference, these have been some dark years. What kept you going? You've got a family. What kept you going with regards to the country and an outlook for the future?
To be quite honest, Joel, what kept me going, and probably what kept many other public figures and particularly politicians going and speaking up and speaking against the narrative, was these people here. Was the people who would email, who would phone from all corners of the country and say, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for being a voice, because no one is listening to me, and we thank you for that. And I've got to tell you that puts some steel in your spine as a politician. So I want to say back to all of those who said thank you to me, thank you. And I want to encourage you on so many other issues. When a politician or any public figure is out there on the limb, you know, with the Greenies or with the COVID brigade or whoever it is, trying to saw that limb of the tree off to topple that person and cancel them, have their back. Do what you did before. Contact them, email them, say thank you, encourage them, because you don't realise how far that goes. It is like fuel in the tank, because day after day, we will just get pushback from the mainstream, whether it's the mainstream media, the mainstream politics, the mainstream parties, and the people in, sadly, mainstream Australia that get sucked in by all of that. So it's negative upon negative upon negative upon negative. Your positives helps keep the fuel in the tank.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, George. Please put your hands together for George. Cheers. There was no way I was going to let him just sit in the audience. That brain, that dormant brain sitting in the audience, that was not going to happen. So we've heard from a number of people already about the upcoming elections in New South Wales. This is probably the second half of my talk. We've got an election coming up on the 25th of March. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm still pretty tired from the federal election. I also went and did the Victorian election, and we got some good results there for the upper house. But we've got some excellent politicians here, two of which have already spoken, Lyle Shelton and John Ruddick. And we've also got Mark Latham, the Honourable Mark Latham, after the break. And George made reference to a lot of phenomenal work Mark's doing. So we want these people to get in. We want these people to be elected, and we want them to have even more numbers. Now, I've got some great news. I wish I could have told the Victorians this, but it just wasn't true. In Victoria, they have worse voting rules than us here. In New South Wales, we have excellent rules with regards to the upper house. We are probably on track to take the balance of power in the upper house. What does that mean? What does that mean? I understand there's a lot of people here that probably, the education system did you no favours with the civics class, so I'm going to break it down. In order to get legislation passed, you need to pass it through the lower house and the upper house. Now, in the lower house, that's whoever wins the most seats, they pick who the Premier is. I'm going to be blunt with you, it's looking like it's going to go Labor. Now, I'm cool as a cucumber, and let me explain why. It doesn't matter if it's Labor or Liberal. If you've got people in the upper house, people like Mark Latham, people like John Ruddick, people like Lyle Shelton, and they control the balance of power, which is the numbers in between, then it doesn't matter if it's Labor or Liberal. You can stop any legislation. And that means that Labor or Liberal, whoever's in government, has to come to them to make deals. Now, this is a message of hope. This election is ours to lose. It's ours. We can take it. We can help people like Mark Latham add more numbers. People like the Liberal Democrats, who were also successful in Victoria, add more numbers and get some more Christians in there as well. Let's not forget there's a massive Christian vote out there in New South Wales. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we're here to help. These are the exact projects we rolled out in Victoria. I don't know if we have the slide ready to go up, but in Victoria we ran 6 projects, and they were very helpful for the Victorians, if I may say so myself. Humility, sorry. Humility. I'm clearly quite chuffed with how well they did, because where responsibility's been abdicated, opportunity lurks. I don't know why we weren't taught this in school, but we should have been, and so I'm trying to help fill that void. As Dave Pelot said, I don't get anything from this. I run purely off donations. This is purely for the education of the public, so that, again, I can tell you who's punching you, why they're punching you, and more importantly, how to punch back. That's it. We're learning. So there's 6 projects that we rolled out for the Victorian election. The first one was a volunteer funnel. Basically, you put your address in. Sorry, don't put your address in. That's not for this. Basically, you put your details in, your name, your number, your email, and you click the parties that you like. And that information gets sent only to them, and you can volunteer yourself as a volunteer at polling booths, at the pleasure of those parties that you pick. Turning Point's got a huge audience of 300,000 across the different platforms, and we want to really give the parties the opportunity, despite censorship, to connect with you guys, because you guys are awesome people. That was really helpful for Victoria. We managed to get 5 excellent candidates up in Victoria, people of conviction that we're not used to seeing on TV, and they're going to make a huge difference in Victoria's elections. The second project we had was the educational graphics. Now, I don't have these graphics here on the screen, but we did these for the Victorian election and the federal election. We had 2 graphics. The first one was a policy matrix, where you can see what the parties believe, what they pledge. I've got a Christian audience in front of me. What do they think on abortion? What do they think on euthanasia? What do they think about, giving parents the right to take back what their kids are being taught? So that this shows in no uncertain terms who's on your side, who's not. And so again, that's about education. We also have another graphic which shows you from left to right where these parties land on totalitarianism. And so obviously you've got the socialists, the Antifa types on the far left, and you've got, more parties like the Liberal Democrats and One Nation on the far right. Now, there's another thing which I'm really hoping I can bring this to you this election. The Victorians loved it. Politician transparency reports. Now, what you do is you put your address in. Don't worry, we don't keep the information. We're not interested in that. You put your address in, and it tells you who your representative is on the lower house. And it tells you how they voted on bills. And it tells you what they've been up to outside Parliament, if there's been any scandals. So you can imagine the one we did for Dan Andrews in Victoria was as long as my arm. We had a lot of, red shirts, just the permanent pandemic legislation. There were a bunch of things. And again, this is the power of people sending us information in. And there's a really cool feature on there where if we've missed something, you can actually make a submission and tell us what we've missed, because some of you know amazing things about your members I didn't even know about. And you can add attachments as well, so just FYI. This is why they want to shut us down. The stories I could tell you, they're trying to shut us down in more ways than I can say. Number 4, how to vote cards. So this was the very first project we rolled out. We rolled it out as a trial for the local elections. In Australia, we have the most robust preferential voting system, also meaning the most confusing. Now, a lot of people, they see a lot of names on the ballot. A lot of the names are good, a lot of the names aren't so good. Who's who? Well, that's where we come in. We know what sort of values you guys like. You're pro-freedom, you're Christian, you'll have a nostalgia for what Australia used to be. Back when we used to do holidays and we used to go on Qantas, and Qantas didn't, start with a acknowledgement of country and that sort of thing. We're trying to bring that sort of country back. And these how to vote cards are done in a way which put politicians of conviction at the top, and then in New South Wales' election, we might cut it off there, or we might put the Liberals, depending on who it is. Someone like Matt Keane, for example, we're cutting him off. He's not. We are unashamedly campaigning against Matt Keane. So these how to vote cards were very well received on a federal level. We got 250,000 downloads, which is insane. And in numbers terms, that helped defund the major parties by like $1.4 million, something crazy. A lot of people don't know this, and they throw their votes away. Every vote that you put as the number 1, that actually gives parties money. That gives them a few dollars, and that adds up. So the how to vote cards we did on a federal level, that really helped them defund the major parties. On top of that, major parties, they go to banks and they show them their primary vote, how many people are putting their party as number 1, and that's the basis of which that they get loans off. So in the federal election, in the state election in Victoria as well, they had a massively declining primary vote, and so their ability to get loans in the future have just diminished. So a lot of people, you don't hear these wins, do you? Because they don't want you to know about it. But this is what's going on. This is what executives in these parties are actually telling me. They shouldn't be, but they are. The other thing I'm doing another graphic as well, where it's going to show you all the different parties and how they preference each other on the upper house ticket. That will show you, are your freedom parties, are your Christian parties, conservative parties, are they playing nice with each other or not? I think you should know. And I'm just putting that out there so that we have more information out there. I'm also providing scrutiny training. We're coming out with a video about how to watch the vote and make sure it's not rigged. And so that's going to be really important for a lot of the diehards in the room, which I'm hearing. And the seventh project, which is a new one, is we're offering a lot of candidate training. If you are a candidate, you're thinking about running, I strongly recommend we can connect you with people, with parties like the ones in this room that are putting candidates up. And I encourage you to head to tpaust.com.au, send me an email. It's me that operates the email, it's not some admin, I do it. And I will send you, I'll pass you details on if you're happy, and we can talk about which party might be a good fit for you. And we can connect with volunteers, and we can smash this out of the park. That's my job. I'm here to help you. I'm your sort of guide along this journey. And as I said, you know, we really should have had this in school, but that's not what's happening. We're expecting a very good result this election. I'm really looking forward to it. Don't listen to them on election night. They're going to be like, oh, Labor won in the lower house. I don't care. I don't care. My eyes are on the upper house. It takes a couple of weeks to count. Let's see what happens there. So I want to thank Dave for putting this event on. I want to thank you guys for listening so intently. And I want to thank George again for his contribution. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Joel, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, Joel Jammal, Turning Point Australia.
Okay, so you've got to look for Joel Jammal, Turning Point Australia, or either of those, Joel Jammal or Turning Point Australia. Stick it in and make sure you go there. Within 5 minutes, he'll have that screen that he gave me and I neglected to put into the slideshow. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you for your mercy. But if you want to get that, then go in there, save that information. So post that straight away and we'll be checking it out in 5 minutes. So search for Joel Jammal or Turning Point Australia.